Morning, everyone. Good morning. All right, it's like we do in church. We got to get your amens in early. Again, it is a pleasure to have everyone here today coming out in your attendance today. I find this to be a treat, an opportunity to allow us to interact with the panel here in front of you. We want this to be an opportunity for you to maybe laugh, get mad, or even shake your head or your finger, the index finger, and I think that'll be a wonderful piece for us here. I think the level of understanding we have here, the breadth and knowledge that you have before you, the experience you have before you, it is a treat. It is a benefit to all of us to have gathered this particular panel together. It's not easy. They are rightfully so tasked with majority of things at their own institution and leading faculty, students, research, taking the opportunity to make things better at their organization. And the fact that they took out time from their busy schedule to come out here and spend time with us, I think it is just overwhelming. I would ask you right now if you would please give them a round of applause for taking out their time to be here with us today. Having the pleasure and the opportunity to sit in this position that I've had for about 5 years now of leading the Department of Navy's HBCUs program has been thrilling. Travel has been fun. We are on the road just about every other week. I think last calendar year we chalked in about 98,000 miles traveling, trying to get to universities, trying to make a difference in what we're doing going forward. I consider that to be part of my duties and responsibilities to make that happen. But I don't do it by myself. My staff and extended staff, Dr. Eaton, who's walking around here, Mr. Washington, who's walking around here, are our go-to people for making these things happen, as well as those you probably don't know and see that are always working in the trenches and behind the scenes, helping us make this happen. Dr. Westmoreland, Dr. Williams, he's around here somewhere. The guy looks like me. And it's not him, but shorter, wiser, that's all. I'll leave it at that. But I want to say thank them as well for supporting the program overwhelmingly and not faulting on that piece at all. I'm going to go ahead and turn the panel over to Dr. Houston, who's our moderator. But I want to give you a little bit of background on Dr. Houston, who I consider my sister, if you will. I'm not going to say older sister, that gets you in trouble, but my sister who I've learned to read from, learn from, how to do things differently. Dr. Houston is the president and CEO of TMT, Technology Management Training Group. She's got a wealth of experience in years, over 30 years in the research area, having been the VPR at Alabama A&M, setting the stage for that school becoming on the limelight in regards to doing research for the Department of Defense, as well as other agencies. Dr. Houston obviously is accomplished in her own right, and she is the perfect person to moderate this panel. I think she can keep those individuals to her left and right in order without any help from me, so I'm going to let her do that. But she does provide that opportunity to understand processes, leadership development, safety, student personnel, faculty research, student internships. She knows how to get it done, and she is the right person for being here and doing that. And with that being said, I would turn over to her. And my extreme excitement is my privilege and my honor to introduce you, Dr. Dorothy Houston. Please give her a hand.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good morning. Good morning. I'm not sure I can live up to that introduction, but I certainly will try. So I'll begin by saying that the goal of this panel discussion is to have conversation about how the Department of Navy's HBCU program can continually strengthen engagement and interaction with our historically black colleges and universities. This is a panel of technical, academic, and research leaders, and they will share their thoughts about how the department might enhance and evolve their outreach strategy. while increasing Navy partnerships with historically black colleges and universities. You'll hear more about it, but the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine published a report in 2019 on minority serving institutions as one of America's underutilized resources for STEM workforce. And a consideration presented by this report to stakeholders in that report is to invest in institutions that already have an established and intentional focus of educating and training students of color. Minority serving institutions enroll nearly 30% of all undergraduate students in higher education in the United States. More diverse undergraduate students are enrolled in STEM fields at four-year institutions at minority-serving institutions than at non-minority serving institutions. A deeper dive this morning will show you that HBCUs account for only 1.9% of the United States institutions of higher learning, but we produce about 25% of African American STEM graduates. And so with that introduction to kind of who we are and why we're here, I'd like to introduce this panel of experts. And I'll start with Dr. Sonia Stevens to my immediate left, my far left, and I'll come this way. She is an associate professor of mathematics at Florida A&M University, Tallahassee. And next to Dr. Stevens is Dr. Victor McCrary. And Dr. McCrary is a member of the National Science Board and serves as Vice President for Research and Graduate Programs at the University of the District of Columbia, Washington. And next to Dr. McCrary is Dr. Alicia Crumpton-Young, who is Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at Morgan State University, Baltimore. And to my immediate right is Dr. Kendall Harris, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Texas Southern University, Houston. And to his immediate right is Dr. Keith Hargrove, Dean, College of Engineering, Tennessee State University, Nashville. And next to Dr. Hargrove is Ms. Veronica Nelson, Executive Director, Advancing Minorities' Interests in Engineering, which we know as AMY, Baltimore. So thank you all for coming. We would like to begin our conversation with a few questions, and near the end, for those of you who are in the audience, we'd like to leave time for you to ask questions of these professionals. So the first question I'd like to ask this morning is, drawing on your experiences and key research findings, what is the role and impact of historically black colleges and universities in the national STEM talent development? And anyone can take the question.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great question. Glad that it was asked because you almost alluded to it when you talked about the report that came out by that the HBCUs and the things they do as far as creating more STEM graduates is an underutilized resource for our country. There's talent in these universities that are remarkable. I think a lot of times when individuals come out to see our universities, one of the first things they always say is, I didn't know that you did this. I didn't know. Sometimes I want to respond, man, do you think we was in huts around here? But at the same time, yes, we're doing quality research. We got a great talent of students, and all we're doing is looking for the opportunity to shine. So, plug for Tony back there. Where you go? Oh, he over there. He's one of the ones that really jumped out and started visiting and saw this talent and saw the abilities that these HBCUs have to offer, and it's that ability to diversify, not just from an ethnic perspective, but diversity of thought. That's one of the biggest benefits of inclusion of everyone is diversity of thought. Some of the toughest problems that our society as a human race are facing because we're not thinking about it in a very holistic approach.
Okay, anyone else would like to add to that?
Good morning. Is it on? Can you all hear me? I would also like to say that I believe that with the students that we have in their backgrounds, what you do when you work with our students in our impact is that we give and provide very innovative solutions. So, due to our paths growing up, our solutions are not standard, and as it was mentioned before, with that diversity of lifestyle brings a diversity in solutions and problem solving as well. So we tend to be more competitive. We put out people that will be more competitive in the workforce who think outside of the box that we generally look at here, and we also think about it from a cultural perspective and also an international perspective, simply due to our background and how we've been brought up.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think I'd just like to add to that. Certainly, I've spent most of my career in large majority institutions. In fact, I'm a graduate of Texas A&M. Howdy.
Howdy.
Thank you very much. Engineering graduate of Texas A&M. So one of the things that I have found being in the HBCU environment is that we produce very agile and responsive strategies for addressing some of our national challenges. And we're able to do so quite quickly. Whereas in large institutions, you have this a certain amount of inertia occasionally. And in our institutions, when we say there's a need, for example, to make sure that we have talent in cloud computing, we're able to put together a bachelor's degree program in cloud computing in just a few months, get that approved and get that offered. We're also very responsive to what's needed in the community. We have a strong relationship axiology. So at Morgan, we have the distinction of being a preeminent public urban research university. So we have the Carnegie classification of R2, but that research is being done in a way that's very responsive to the needs of the agency. So agility, responsiveness, and ensuring that we're producing relevant solutions that are needed in our community, I think is what you find in our institutions as well.
So that response leads me to another question, and that is, why don't you all share with us some of the programs, the specific research programs that you have that are useful in and it provided evidence and success in producing STEM graduates and research activities that the Navy would be interested in?
Be glad to chime in on that. So at the University of the District of Columbia, right now, we are working with the Naval Research Laboratory because we're looking at secure communications between Aegis-class carriers. About 5 years ago, the folks out in the blue ocean thought that they could not be hacked. But of course, when they did the communications between the Tomac planes and those ships, they found that there was problems with that. So we're working with that as Professor Paul Cote. Another thing that we're doing is we just signed an agreement with the Applied Research Laboratory at Penn State. So we've been working with them looking at undersea communications as well as additive manufacturing. We have one of the largest 3D additive manufacturing printers that we actually was donated to us by the Navy. And what we're doing is looking at different types of materials, particularly for Virginia-class submarines. The other thing that we are working on with the Navy is that also this issue of workforce development. As you know, most of the people who are working in the Navy or DOD writ large, those folks have to be U.S. citizens, and they have to be able to get clearances. So we are starting a program where our students can do internships. They can get collateral secret when they come in. If they continue on with those internships and, of course, keep their nose clean when they get out, they can be employees. We started a program similar like this a few years ago at Morgan with the Applied Physics Lab, Johns Hopkins. And so from our point of view, this is also how we're working with the Navy. Most recently, one of the biggest concerns that both Navy and DOD has had writ large is the issue of the skilled technical workforce. These are these people who are post-high school but pre-bachelors, but they're very important in terms of electricians, welders, cyber-type folks. We're lucky because we kind of have a a unique university in the fact that we have a community college all the way up to graduate school in engineering and a law school. And so we can train folks. We have an aviation program, so working with NavAir down at Pax River. We can take young women and young men who have no mechanical aptitude. After 2 years, they can get an FAA certificate, and they can go work on planes, or they can go down to Pensacola.
Okay, Dr. Stevens? Share some of the programs that you have at Florida A&M.
Yes, ma'am. So we have a particular program where we're working with Mr. Smith, one of our physics professors, and it was a very interesting. It worked well for the university because she's an assistant professor and she was awarded a grant. And I don't want to get it mixed up because I'm math, I'm not physics, but she deals with probing functional materials under extreme conditions. And one of the things that we valued about that program is while she is working with some doctoral students, she's also incorporating our undergraduates, which we found to be extremely important. So as we talked about creating preparing students for the workforce and bringing them in at an early age and incorporating that into the classroom made it beneficial. But it also brought to their attention that there is a place for them not only in the Navy, but in other military agencies. So what we found with our students when it comes to military agencies and participation, it is from the lower to middle part of the agency. So in other words, we have ROTC, but in terms of looking at the Navy and participating and collaborating with them in other national labs on a research level, it was really never entertained. We also have another faculty member in the physics department who is working with the Navy and also PNNL, and he deals with lasers. And again, he has partnerships with PNNL and also Lawrence Livermore, and so his graduate students get to go to those labs and do the research there for like a year. So our particular relationship with the Navy has benefited us not only on the doctoral level, because I also serve as the Associate Dean in the College of Science and Technology at Florida A&M University, and in our college, our physics department offers the PhD. That's our only department that offers that, although, as it was alluded to earlier, we do have a couple of other programs coming on board rather quickly to answer the needs that are out there. But the benefit for us is we get to start the students out on the BS level and letting them see that there is a place for them within the Navy, and it's not necessarily on the front line or either in a submarine. But there is a research division, and they didn't really know that, so there was always hesitancy. And so Dr. Como and Dr. Lewis Johnson have done very well to help us with that relationship also.
I'm going to go here to Dr. Hargrove, and I'll come back, Dr. Young.
Yeah. Testing. Just one comment relative to the last question. The workforce challenge that was talked about in that report that came out, I just want to acknowledge that the institutions that are before you, the reason they exist in terms of being mission focused is really about the workforce challenge. The institutions that I believe before you have always been about providing and producing diversity for the workforce challenge from the time that they were created until today. And I think that commitment and the mission of the institutions are key and are committed to doing that. With reference to the question, if I can just very quickly use an analogy when it comes to relationships. So imagine there are three phases in a relationship when it comes to two individuals. There's a courting and dating, there's an engagement, and then there's a marriage. So think of those three phases in a relationship. So at Tennessee State University, the Crane Naval Warfare Center, we made an initiative to begin a relationship with that facility. Now, it did not happen overnight. As we were talking about before, everything begins with some kind of relationship, and every relationship, again, go through these phases. So with Crane, there was a discovery period of our capabilities and what the Crane Naval Research needs were. That was kind of like a dating, discovering what can each of us do for each other. Then the engagement happened when, hey, there's opportunity for us to do research relative to lithium ion batteries, and having a faculty member visit and work there, have students work at Crane, have individuals from Crane come to TSU and talk about their ongoing research. And then the third phase is the marriage, whereby we have an existing documented relationship whereby two of our PhD students, graduates, are working there, and we're preparing for a third PhD student to work at Crane. Now, if you know anything about Crane, Crane is a very isolated, homogeneous, and big base. The opportunity to provide graduates from our program is monumental in terms of what that facility looks like. But the key point is that that kind of relationship and that facility outreach and our partnership made that happen. I do want to acknowledge, and I don't know if many of you know, about almost 25 years ago, the Naval Engineering Education Consortium, NEEC, started about 20 years ago, and the Navy was at the forefront in looking at ways how we're going to address these 50 plus individuals working in the Navy as they get ready to retire. So now what? They're now 70 plus. And the Navy made the initiative to reach out to the University of Michigan, which was the lead institution, but there are a number of HBCUs that were a part of that. That was just an outstanding effort, and I think the benefits have been very beneficial for not only the workforce, as far as research, and the institutions that were a part of that as well.
Very good, thank you. Dr. Young, share with us some of the programs at Morgan that would be of interest to our Navy partners.
Well, one of the things, and I'll say this quickly because I know there are a number of other questions. My response to the question of which programs have we worked on, I can certainly tell you about the battery energy program we've worked on. I can certainly tell you about the advanced materials program that we worked on, the cyber engineering program, the cybersecurity programs that we've worked on. But I think my answer is that we haven't worked on enough programs with the Navy. And I really say that because of the ones we have worked on, they've had significant outcomes. We've produced great graduates, we've produced relevant research findings, we've produced some patents as a result. And because of that, that says to me that we need to be working on more things together. We're focused on producing PhD graduates in the STEM and engineering fields. And I know that you need more of those, especially that are US citizens, and that come from a background where they can do diverse solution development. So in using the analogy that Dean Hargrove started, I think it's really, I'm happy that we're here today because really the conversation should be about how can we further strengthen the relationship? How can we just get married, stay married, and work on the many areas that are challenges facing the Navy? And so I'm excited about continuing that conversation.
Okay, we will continue that conversation with the notion, what are the primary challenges and opportunities you see with HBCUs partnering with the Navy to produce STEM graduates and research of interest? Yes, you may go.
Thank you very much. I've already said that what I'd like to do is strengthen our relationship. I think the greatest opportunity is for us to decide that we're going to significantly work together. I'll give you a statistic. There are 101 HBCUs. Last year, in terms of grants and contracts, they received $1.6 billion in federal support. Johns Hopkins, a wonderful institution very close to me, received 2.6 billion. So one institution received 2.6, 101 HBCUs received 1.2. So what I'm suggesting is that we collectively come together and decide that we're going to do some type of consortium arrangement, this true marriage, and fund that for a significant period of time so that we can produce the outcomes that the Navy needs to have. So a consortium of schools, consistent funding, so that we can produce the outcomes. We have 11 HBCUs that are now Carnegie classified as R2 institutions. So that means they're doing high quality research and they're graduating doctoral students. Imagine what it would mean for our nation, and imagine what it would mean for the Navy if we came together, developed a consortium, and ensured that we had consistent funding so that we can produce the first HBCUs to become R1 institutions. So that's what I think we should do together.
Okay, very good. Let's go to Dr. Harris and then to you, Dr. McCreary.
Thank you very much. The opportunities are definitely there. This is an untapped market that we definitely can go and move into across the board, across the HBCUs. I love what Doc said, that it is not a competition, but it's a completion. That as these HBCUs join together and go after individual resource thrusts, that can ultimately benefit the Navy. I think one of the big things is almost reversing it around to do exactly what Mrs. Smith did. It's getting out there to see what these universities have to offer. You will be amazed. I think back to I'm just coming into this position in the last couple of years, 2 years. But my previous institution at another HBCU is when Mr. Smith first visited. And some of the research opportunities and some of the work that they did there is not what he came there looking for. But just to be able to peel that back and get and build that relationship has allowed some very significant work to be done with Dr. Chen there, to the point where I used to call him, he was my Midas king. Whenever he touched for the Navy, it just turned to gold. It was, you know, I had to hire people just to keep up with the research that the Navy wanted him to do. So it's that type of opportunity that we can find in each of our institutions. But if the relationship is never formed, if we never reach across the aisle on both sides, us as HBCUs coming and presenting to you, but at that same time, you as the Department of the Navy coming to HBCUs and visiting us to see exactly what the opportunities that we have there. Where my new institutions, see, I'm from putting this shameless plug right here, don't have any current research projects, but I was thinking about our transportation, the research we do in the area of transportation, especially in the autonomous vehicle, and the points of intersection that we're looking at for autonomous vehicle, where, you know, not only the science, the AI behind it, but also the sociology, the sociological impact that we may have when you start launching these autonomous vehicles into communities, into surroundings. All those things are the things that we're looking at. So not just the science, but also the social science behind it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McCreary.
I just want to ask, how many people here are program managers, program officers? Raise your hand. Okay. And as part of your job, you're funding mostly 6.1 to 6.3 research, okay? Eventually, that's going to go out into the fleet at some point in time. And so your job at some point is to develop this fundamental technology and research to mitigate risk, okay? Just like DARPA funds research in order to mitigate technological surprise, you do the same thing. Same thing as what the National Science Foundation. Last week, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology met with the National Science Board and talked about the industries of the future. Okay, there's 5 industries, but the 2 that are extremely important to you all are quantum computing and artificial intelligence. And so, you know, many folks around here have talked about the importance of HBCUs, but I'm going to give you a historical lesson that's extremely important, okay? When the Navy during World War II had problems with aircraft carriers and fires on top, they went to the top schools, and no one came up with anything but a scientist named Percy Julian, who came up with fire retardants. He was at Howard University, okay? That's one. Two, National Science Foundation likes to talk about it like Vannevar Bush. He was the founder of NSF. He led the Office of Science and Research and Development during World War II. He helped out a whole lot to push the whole technology for us to defeat the enemies. But all of us have blind spots. And you know what his blind spot was? Robert Goddard. He thought that Goddard was a crank because he played with rockets, okay? He said, in fact, he's quoted as saying, any scientist who plays with rockets can't be serious, until Eisenhower took him over to London and said, what are these things called V1s and V2s? The United States had totally missed guided missiles because we didn't understand organic chemistry, which the Germans did, and they had liquid fuel rockets, okay? And of course, you know the story after that. You know how we got up. We basically took all their scientists and brought them over here. Now, fast forward. We have to figure out, how do we defend the blue littorals? How do we penetrate the red littorals, okay? Can we afford to miss out something where someone has artificial intelligence on an anti-torpedo torpedo, okay, that puts the fleet at harm? Can we worry about not being able to have sensors that can work on the ocean floor? Because right now, we don't have really good communications undersea. And undersea warfare is extremely important, particularly when we start outfitting these new Virginia-class platforms that are out there. And so there are new materials. There's going to be new ways to communicate. Right now, we don't really communicate undersea pretty well. In fact, DARPA just started a program called the Ocean of Things right now. So my question is, to mitigate your risks, I know you have your standard folks that you deal with, but if I were you, and I wanted to mitigate my risk as a program officer, I would include a group of people that you know normally don't have included, okay, to make sure you don't have a blind spot. Because I wouldn't want to read about you in history and say you were Vannevar Bush, okay, and you dismiss somebody because they went to a different college or they weren't in your thing. I would, if I was a program officer, I would take the chance and put my money on all of these institutions here, because you don't know what you don't know. That's the Johari window, okay? And if you wanted to make a bet to say, okay, how can I penetrate the red littorals? How can I make sure that I can use AI to my advantage? How can I make sure that someone else doesn't come up with a quantum computer and break the RSA codes? I might be able to run a couple competitions in universities that are not probably in the mainstream and have their students do this, because all of their students have an iPhone. All of their students are very intrigued. And again, you never know where those solutions come up from. I put my bet on the HBCUs if I were you.
Okay, so thank you. So Dr. Young mentioned the Tier 2 institutions. We also have, as part of the panel, Ms. Veronica Nelson, who is with AMY, Advancing Minorities in Engineering. And there are 15 HBCUs with ABET accredited engineering programs. So my question to you, Ms. Nelson, is, given the experiences that AMY have had in working with these 15 HBCUs with ABET accredited engineering programs, what do you see as the unique contributions that these institutions can provide to the Navy?
Thank you. So as Dr. McCrary stated, you don't know what you don't know. And so many times we partner with universities that we're familiar with. We also talked about diversity of thought. And so we all know that there are several inventions out there where they did not have that diverse team working on it. Something as simple as in the bathroom, the sensors. And so it doesn't work for everyone. So it's really important for you to really think outside the box and look at those 15 HBCUs. And so we talked about stats. When we look at those 15 HBCUs, they are ABET accredited, they have ABET accredited engineering programs.
They are approximately 3% of the engineering universities across the country, but they produce 30% of the African American talent with bachelor's degrees. African American talent. So when we look at clearances and we look at, you look at that population, that is a untapped resource that you need to take advantage of. But many times we don't know what we don't know. And so as Dean Hargrove stated, he came with the 3 phases. And so sometimes prior to dating is really that whole discovery. And so what Amy does, and we would like to share with all of you, we have something we call our Amy tool, okay? And it's this book here, and this book is from last year, but it has current information in it. So this highlights the 15 HBC universities. It will tell you the engineering programs that they have at the bachelor's, master's, and PhD level. It will also give you a highlight of their research capabilities. And then we also have each one of the dean's contact information. And so ways that we have been successful, we partner with corporations and government agencies to create strategic partnerships. And so not the drive-by partnerships where you come once for fall and you come once for spring for recruitment, but we're not only here to help you with your workforce development, but we're here to make sure that we give you additional capabilities and resources when it comes to research. And so we've had successful relationships and partnerships with many of organizations such as Lockheed Martin, IBM, Raytheon, many companies that you're familiar with. And so the key is just to take the opportunity and give those 15 universities and HBCUs a chance.
Very good. So, Dr. Hargrove, coming this way, then each of you represent institutions that are ABET accredited, one of the Amy organizations. So, what do you see as the return on investment for the Navy in terms of funding impactful partnerships with your HBCU?
So I would, is this something? Yeah, I would respond in 3 ways. Number one is the need and the demand to populate your workforce in the STEM areas. Number 2, the institutions have the capability to contribute to advanced research to help address the needs. For example, we have a couple of O&R grants that are focused on sensors to detect corrosion in aircraft. That's a very valid and important need for the Navy. And then third is regarding, I believe, in terms of the relationship that adds to with an exchange between faculty and working professionals at the Navy sites, that in a sense also contributes to the curriculum and to knowledge, making it the curriculum contemporary, relevant, and building on the education, the engineering education that are provided by the institution.
Very good. 3 important investment returns. Would you like to add to that?
I'll just add one to that. As you all know, Dean Hargrove and I, we call ourselves brothers and sisters. So I won't repeat what he has said because I agree with what he said. I'll just add one thing. Our institutions are also here to be responsive to your workforce needs. So if there are needs for advanced education, needs for specific certifications in cloud computing or even project management and those types of needs, we, in addition to the 3 points of what we do with students on our campus, we can be a resource to respond to your continued educational needs as well for your current workforce.
So, very good. So with that, can you share with us, anyone can take this one, what is the #1 challenge facing HBCUs in terms of actually doing work with the Navy and even Department of Defense at large?
I'll take that.
Okay.
We're in their blind spot.
My mother used to have a saying that says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think that goes well here in the sense that we ask you to be extremely intentional in bringing us at the table, as well as we have to do that ourselves. But we have to know the invitation, because if you're not at the table, you don't know what the game is, okay? So I might think that you're playing Bid Whist and you're playing Texas Hold'em. And what do I mean by that? An analogy is to be intentional, and Mr. Smith has done an excellent job, but also asking you as program officers to make sure, for example, I believe every 2 years ONR has its exhibition where they talk about, have performers come out, they talk about the technologies, all of you all get together in a hotel nearby. You know, make sure that we're invited to those things. But also, where possible, even in between those type of events, make sure to reach out. These people here are the contact points to the technology in their institutions to come out, to bring their faculty, to sit down, whether it's over a conference call or in person, to talk about new technologies. I'll also give you an invitation. I mean, in 3 days will be the largest collection of African American STEM professionals in the country, which will be at the Marriott Wardman Park Hotel. It's the 2020 Black Engineer of the Year Awards Conference. That conference has been going on for nearly now 40 years. All of your contemporaries, or you may even competitor agencies, will be there recruiting and engaging. All of our institutions, and Amy, Veronica, and her folks will all be there. So that's how we get there. Now, the next thing is, when you have some of these work groups, reach out and try to get some of our faculty. Obviously, they have to be cleared or have to be eligible, but get them on there. And when you go into your networks, whether it's NDIA, National Defense Industry Association, or whether it's the Defense Science Board, make sure and be intentional about calling folks and try to get people on these boards. Because once you're at the table, you understand what's on the menu instead of being on the menu. And then we can respond in terms of what the research that we have, to tell you about the research you may not know about. As somebody once said, a lot of times when people come to our campuses, they say, oh my God, I didn't know you were working on all of these things. I could use this. But because you don't know what you don't know. And so in doing those things and building those connections, and where possible, because this is DOD, make sure that you can have some of those folks at the table. The schools here have been also intentional about making sure some of our people are cleared, at least at the collateral secret level. Some of us have TS, but again, bring those people into the conversation. And when you bring those people in a conversation, you'll be surprised what you'll find out.
So I'd like for Dr. Young, and then we'll come back and go across once on this final question regarding the primary challenge.
So thank you very much. In keeping with the metaphors and the analogies that have been used, I was reared in Texas. And so in Texas, we had a saying that said, if you see a snake, just kill it. Don't appoint a committee to discuss it. Well, that's extremely appropriate for being in higher education. So when I became a program officer at the National Science Foundation, and I had a portfolio to award roughly $100 million a year in funding. Prior to that, I had never attended an HBCU. I'd never taught at an HBCU. I had no knowledge. And when I inherited my funding portfolio, I realized that after I made my first year of awards, that I did not fund any HBCUs. And so it was then that we realized I did not have a diverse portfolio. But I did not know much about an HBCU. Now, I know many of you are thinking, well, how's that possible? She's African American. But I simply did not have the experience. And so what I think we need to do as program officers, program directors, and those of us that have the ability to make a difference, we have to push ourselves to learn more about the HBCUs. So what I did, I was right here in Arlington, Virginia. I was actually at the National Science Foundation when it was right here in Wilson. I actually invited a group of HBCUs to come to DC and have a conversation with me as a program officer about my opportunities. I also went out and decided I was going to visit more of their institutions. I will tell you, I was shocked during those visits because I had no idea the quality of work that was being done. I had no idea the quality of students that were being educated, and I had no idea about the quality of faculty because I simply knew what I knew. I knew about Texas A&M. I knew about all of the R1s. I knew about all the large majority institutions. So I think the biggest challenge is that we have to, as program officers, encourage ourselves to learn what we don't know, diversify our portfolios, and stop saying that we'll do it next year or the following year because we're too busy to focus on it this year. I think that has been, to me, that is the greatest challenge. And I can share that because that was my challenge when I was a program officer and I was making the decisions about who to fund and about my portfolio. So that's when I decided if you see a snake, just kill it. Don't appoint a committee to discuss it. I didn't need to talk to the other program officers and program directors because I had the authority to make those decisions with my portfolio. So I decided let me be the change I needed to see.
Very good. Can anyone add to that? Because I want to leave a few minutes for questions from the audience.
I guess I haven't been in Texas long enough to catch some of these sayings.
Write a book for you.
So I got the Texas sayings before I can get that. But you're absolutely right. The opportunity is there, and I think this is one of the first steps. The toolkit that Ms. That we talked about from Amy, and that toolkit is very, 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 very important because it gives you the concept, but it also gives you some capabilities. That's one of the first initial steps that anyone can take and have and reach out and make those initial conversations. A lot of it is the conversation of trying to find the matches. You have to find the matches, those points of intersections where your particular area that you're sponsoring has a need, and there's a need at that university. Ms. Nelson, I think you brought some copies of it?
I did.
Okay.
I have copies for everyone. So as you stated, so a lack of knowledge equals a lack of access, a lack of funding and resources. And so we want to make sure that we allow you to see what capabilities that exist. And so I have several copies that I can share with everyone. And then that will give the program officers the opportunity to see what capabilities exist at those 15 HBCUs.
So,
Yeah, just very quickly. Many of you have heard that the current student loan debt is about $1.5 trillion. That's one stat. The second stat is about 60 to 70% of high school graduates are not college ready. Those two things are the same challenges that every college is faced, including the ones that are up here. Affordability and preparation to succeed in college. The HBCUs do a very unique transformation in addressing those two challenges, but I continue to advocate the investment, whether it's coming from a corporation or it's coming from the Air Force or it's coming from the Navy, is an attempt to address those two challenges that we face as well as every other college or university in the country.
very good. So with that, I'd like to invite the audience you've heard about opportunities, you've heard about challenges, you've heard about the quality of our research and our students of color, African Americans in particular, that we're graduating. Are there questions from any members of the audience? They've indicated to you that they want to discover, they want to date, they might want to marry, so they want to marry? Okay, make sure we want to marry. So I just would like to open it up for the last few minutes to questions that you might have in response to the conversation we've had. Anyone? We have a microphone right here in the center.
So I read a statistic which I haven't verified, and that is that about 70% of the high school students who are graduating plan to go into STEM fields end up not finishing a STEM degree.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. You know, one of the things that most of our institutions, and I can particularly speak for ours, because we have a major institution right across the street from us, and with that happening, there's a lot of competition. So you may get a student that come in at this level, and their freshmen come in at this level, but by the time they're seniors, they better be here. And that's what we're doing is making up that gap of making sure that they have the opportunities and the resources because we're going to put everything in them that's required so that they can compete from graduates from any other institution across there. So that's one of the things that Dr. Hargrove was alluding to in the uniqueness of the HBCU of making up that gap.
We just had our budget testimonies here in Maryland. So at Morgan, if you look at engineering, we're the #1 producer of electrical engineers in the state of Maryland, #3 in the nation in terms of African American graduates. And then our statistics are good in the civil engineering, industrial engineering, but then also if you look at statistics of institutions that produce doctoral graduates in the area, we're also a leading institution. Our graduation rates have increased significantly. Our retention rates have increased significantly. And really, the secret is really no secret. We use what's called intrusive advising. So we put wraparound services, intrusive advising. We use early alerts. We ensure that we know. We check the pulse, just like you check the pulse on your vessels. We check the pulse on our students. It's our core business to know how they are doing, when they don't understand something, and what we need to do to intervene, and what type of intervention we have to put in place. And at our institution and at the other sitting here, we do that in a way that is an engineered science. And that's the difference at our institutions.
The other thing I would like to add to that is at our institutions, it is not a job or a business, it's our passion and our love. So as those students come into our school, it is our personal mission to get them out because we can relate to them, we've seen them, and so therefore a lot of our services and a lot of the resources that we offer are those that we know that work. As she mentioned, it's an engineered science, but it is personal for us. So that level of care that we offer the students typically is not as universal and as institutionalized at the other majority institutions as it is at HBCUs.
Let's take this
Question.
question from the floor.
Almost good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You may have answered my question already. I mean, it's great that you have you put value in young people as scientists, but I don't know how to answer this question without offending somebody. But how do you place value them as people, as good people?
Well, one of the ways we place the value is, so this is coming from the research point of view, is when you have that research and they have that research experience, like as we do as the University of District of Columbia, as with all these institutions, by getting that research experience, that puts arrows in their quiver that allows them to navigate through society. Because when you undergo a discipline where you're learning STEM and then you also get hands-on research experience, it does a couple of things. One, it makes you more marketable. By also making you also more marketable and you build confidence in your ability to do this thing. Because a lot of our kids, particularly say in the district, we get a lot of kids from Ward 7 and Ward 8. The District of Columbia is a tale of two cities. Average income in the other wards is $140,000. In Ward 7 and Ward 8, it's $40,000. You can imagine trying to live in the District of Columbia on $40,000. A lot of those kids who come out of those have don't have very few role models, don't have a lot of confidence. But when they come into our programs, ability to do research in those areas, that builds their confidence, that builds them that they can look in the mirror. And that's what all these institutions do, that they can go out and say, hey, look, I can compete. I can make a difference, whether it's working for the Navy, doing research, okay? Whether it's enlisted, whether it's working as a machinist, whatever, they're allowed to be able to do those type of things. So in some sense, what we do is we invest dignity in the young women and the young men who come through our institutions. And once you have that feeling of dignity, if God be for you, who could be against you?
And one of the things I'll add to that, certainly we've heard about passion, we've heard about instilling dignity. I think that what we're doing is very intentional with our faculty. I think you brought up an excellent point. How do we value them as people? Those of you that have read the Chronicle, you've seen a number of articles recently about understanding your students, understanding the type of student you have. And so we convene our faculty multiple times per year to have conversations about the type of students we have and what they need to be aware of that may be plaguing our students outside of the classroom. And if you look at the issues associated with mental health, there have been a number of things, articles about mental health and the increase on campuses. Well, that's stress, workload, fatigue, that's concern over debt. And those things, they surprisingly, they actually do interrupt your ability to focus on differential equations. So we have to work. I know those of you, how many of you started shaking when I said differential equations? Just remembering what you've been through with first order and second order differential equations. So what we're doing is we're being intentional with our faculty, making sure they're aware of those things, putting resources there to help the students so that they can persist and do well academically.
Can you get the guy one more question? I'm sorry, excuse, I don't want to kind of run out of time. The guy behind you has one more question.
One more thing. I only wanted to bring that up because when I was in college, I had a few health issues myself. So I thought it's really important that, that's part of who they are, and that's what you have to address.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. First of all, thank you all for what you do every day. Everything you're talking about in terms of bringing diverse viewpoints, bringing STEM-educated U.S. persons to the field, we're all on board for that, so thank you for that. It really leads to my question, though, in terms of, and it relates to the title of the talk today that I'd like to harp on a little bit, is the underutilization piece. You gave a lot of facts and anecdotes about the good job that you're doing, and I think what I didn't get out is where the underutilization pieces are. What pieces are missing? Is it that you're not converting people who are your graduates into jobs, or you're not getting support for your graduate students? Where can we help? And part of my question ties to an anecdote of my own. I supported a professor who was, excuse me, at a minority-serving institution with a grant. And I got an email a couple of years later that said, "Thanks so much for your support. We did great work." And I was able to move to a bigger research institution. I think that's obviously, I think, not long-term what we want. We want to be able to have an ongoing ecosystem where we can leverage the talent pool that you're helping create. So I'd be interested to get more insight into where you see the underutilization pieces and what the right ways or most helpful or effective ways we can to tap into those.
Well, one of them is by supplying the research, you give those faculty and students exposure to the interests of the Navy's research ecosystem, and I'm gonna tell you why it's underutilized. So I live in Maryland. I do a lot of work on the DoD side. I was with some folks from the NSA. We used to call it No Such Agency, but we know what that stands for. And I don't live that far from the University of Maryland, which is the state's flagship school. But one of the things NSA was complaining to me was that in the electrical engineering classes there, 60% of the students were foreign nationals, okay? They could not hire those students. And I said, well, how come you're not going over to Morgan? Okay, they put out a lot of electrical engineers. They're right there in the state of Maryland, I mean, I'm looking out, I'm spreading the wealth. There's enough to go around for everybody, which is one piece that we need to understand. And so the underutilization is, however, it's not a short-term project. You've got to invest in places like Morgan, your program, I'm assuming you're a program officer, to build that capability, okay, as well as with these other institutions. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. The Dory Miller was the first African-American to have an aircraft carrier named after her, since this is Black History Month. Can you afford to have the Chinese version of the Tomahawk come after that because we didn't invest in enough organizations that were diverse enough to come up with a palette of solutions to go against that. So that's where the underutilization is that you have a research base here that's extremely broad and not tapped. And I'll tell you this, as we told the President's Council and advisors, I mean, if you don't get a chance, this just came out last month. This is the 2020 National Science Board every 2 years, indicators of science and engineering in this country. And when you read this, it is a wake-up call red flag. We are losing our lead in global R&D. We are losing, as you probably know, whether it's classified or unclassified, our lead in QC and AI. Can you afford to be in a competition when you have 30% of the people on the bench? I don't think so. So that's where the underutilization is coming. And don't look at it like charity. No one wants charity here, okay? We want you to invest because I think every day we wake up and say, hey, look, we want the United States to be preeminent in R&D, okay? But give us a chance to play on the court, okay?
So thank you very much for your question with that, because I want to wrap up here. But no, can you give the panel a hand, please, for their time? And I think that one of the big things I wanted to say, and we're short on time, but I do want to do two things real quick. One, it talks about my people perish for lack of knowledge. And I think we've gained enough knowledge today that there's no reason for us to perish and not go forth and do the things that was mentioned on here. I do want each panel member, please take 30 seconds or so to go around, starting with Ms. Nelson, and just one quick statement on why HBCUs. We've heard about R&D, we've heard about vision, we've heard about networking, we've heard about trying to assist students and faculty, we've heard about emotional and mental, we've heard about all that, but my final question, 30 seconds or so, why HBCUs? Ms. Nelson.
I just want to say HBCUs, as we discussed, we are in a critical untapped resource. And so it's critical for you to start to partner with us. And again, I am here to give you the information that you need.
Dr. Hargroves.
I would be embarrassed if I told you what my ACT score was, in the teens. But I end up going to an institution like that's up here and going to grad school at the University of Iowa, University of Michigan, and even spent a postdoc at Harvard. HBCUs provide opportunity, an opportunity to transform lives and unleash unknown potential.
Thank you.
The relationship is long-term. It is not a one-shot deal, guys. We want you to have investment in us, and we want to have an investment with you. The problems that we're facing in our society are humongous. They're huge. They need this diversity of thought to come to the right solution. Because if they did not need this, guess what? They would be solved by now.
I say why HBCUs is really, to me, it's a matter of national security. It is our mission, not something we do as a competing objective. It's our mission to graduate students that are truly members of the workforce of the future, the workforce that responds to the national needs and national grand challenges. And if we don't invest in these institutions that have truly shown both productivity and performance, then we're going to find ourselves without this critical workforce of the future. It's going to look very different from what we need it to look like, and it's going to be a missed opportunity. So it's not something we do by happenstance. It's not something we do when we don't want to be in our research laboratories. It is our mission to develop that critical workforce. And so it's a matter of national security, in my opinion.
Thank you.
When I was at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory for 8 years, I controlled $10 million a year in IRAD portfolio, but I invested $1 million in HBCUs every year. And the reason I did that was to mitigate my risk because I didn't know what I didn't know. HBCUs help you mitigate your risk. They help you in your research with new ideas, and they're extremely important for vital workforce.
Dr. Stevens.
So with all that said, I simply close with, why not?
Thank you. Guys, give him a hand, please.